Good morning, everybody, or whatever time you're watching this. It is Monday, December 24th, 2018. Let me first just say Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, all that good stuff to every one of you watching. My name is Luke Thomas. I'm the host of the MMA Hour right here on MMAFighting.com. Now, it is Christmas Eve, so we couldn't get everybody into the office. People do deserve a little bit of time off, but we didn't want to leave you hanging, so we're not going to do that today. We're not going to have a full show. There's just no time for that. I don't think anybody wants to see that on a Christmas Eve day. But here's what we are going to do. This coming Saturday at UFC 232, it is the return of Jon Jones when he takes on Alexander Gustafsson for the second time to see who will be the new UFC light heavyweight champion. So here's what we're going to do today. Not a full MMA hour, but we are going to do a full Monday Morning Analyst. So what's it going to be on? It is going to be a look ahead. Now, if you normally know what I do on this segment, it actually is never a look ahead. It's always a look behind. But here's what we can do. If you look at what Saturday is, forget the co-main event, which is a wonderful fight, but let's just focus in on that main event. They actually already fought once. So we can look behind to look ahead. We can look at that and say, as long ago as that was, 5 years and some change, I believe, what lessons can we infer from that? How has Jon Jones matured? What do we know, and what can we expect, and what's the information gap in between? So that's what we're going to do. As always, a word of caution. I'm not going to present to you these findings as the authoritative findings, as the only findings that matter, as the best findings that matter, merely as how I see it. I always encourage you to go and check out what other people have to say and get a larger perspective and make up your own mind in the end. Okay? Okay. Let's go to the slide here. Let's kick things off on today's program. Nice little slide for you, right? Now, there's a lot of different ways to understand this. I thought, how do I take what's already happened and use it to better predict what might come in front, or at least what we're working with, what different variables might be the most important? I decided to focus in on Jon Jones for a lot of reasons. Obviously, he's the biggest star in that particular contest. He's the one that is the prohibitive favorite. Prohibitive is a strong word, but he's the favorite. He's the one that was, of course, the figure of controversy after the first fight. And so I just figured we'd start with him. And here's what I did. This is going to be the second rematch of Jon's career, right? The first was the DC fight. And then the second DC fight, UFC 182, UFC 214. So what I did was I went back and I watched, how did Jon win that first fight? How did Jon win the second fight? And what did the two tell us? Here's what it tells us. I'm going to be very clear about this. Max Holloway has some of the highest fight IQ in the game, arguably the highest. It's a little bit debatable. TJ Dillashaw's up there as well. But for my money, pound for pound, the smartest fighter in the game is that guy, Jon Jones. Now, I realize he's not my best friend, but you got to call balls and strikes like you see them. When you watch him compete, something is immediately clear to you. He has one of the most distinct styles that I think I've ever seen. And his decision-making in a fight and then between fights, which is also a function of growth, not merely decision-making, but the two are related, is extremely high. How do we understand Jon Jones as a fighter? We understand him, in my mind, again, there are many ways, but these are four of the best ways, I think. I put this number one for a reason. Adaptability, 2 ways. You ever gone to like a fancy schmancy restaurant and they're like, you can have cauliflower 2 ways, and then they'll sear it one way and then puree it the next, and they'll serve them to you both, and they're both cauliflower, but it's given to you in sort of highly unique ways. That's how you have to think of Jon Jones' adaptability. Here's what he does. He both makes adaptations in the fight and then makes adaptations between fights. Now again, between fights is also a function of growth period, given that he's usually had at least a year or two between these rematches. But the point is still nevertheless pretty clear. He takes lessons from the first fight in between them and reincorporates them. And then in the fight itself, he makes adaptations. Why is that so important? Because if you look at, I remember when Canelo Alvarez was going to fight Floyd Mayweather, my prediction was pretty simple. And if Floyd was still in his prime, I'd say the exact same thing. Your first 6 rounds are your most important. because if you don't hurt or sting him then, it's a wrap for you. It's a wrap for you. Early on, Floyd always kind of is hesitant because he's making reads, he's collecting information, and he's making adjustments. And round over round, he takes things from you. Max Holloway does the exact same thing. Your best round is probably going to be your first or second round against him. After that, he turns on the afterburners, and he sets you on fire. He did it to Jose Aldo twice in the third round. He did it to Brian Ortega in the third round, and then in that fourth round. Brian had a bit of a stronger third round, but it didn't matter in the end. Right? He just, over time, he takes everything away from you. Jon Jones is the exact same thing. Even if you think Gustafsson won the first fight, what were Jon's two best rounds? The fourth and the fifth, right? These are where he really came to life. And I know the fourth one is controversial. We don't need to relitigate it, but just sort of pointing that out. This guy's ability to make choices in fights is absurdly good. Now, you remember this debate he had with Daniel Cormier, like, Daniel, you were on steroids, or Daniel said, Jon, you were on steroids, and Jon would say, that left kick that knocked you out of UFC 214 wasn't about steroids. Well, that's actually not the best argument, because if you are on steroids, it will potentially help with, in some ways, confidence athletically. It could help with reflexes and that kind of a thing. But here's the point about Jon's career, and I think what he was trying to say. There's just so much evidence that his decision-making skills are absurd and so good and so high level that whatever you think about his run-ins with USADA, and at this point, everyone's got their own made-up mind, it is, even if you think he used or you think he didn't use, it is incontestably true that he has decision-making skills far above his peers. And even if he was taking, it wouldn't make that as clear as just having those skills does, right? Like, you can take all the steroids in the world, they'll help with some things, certainly in your fight, but it wouldn't help him in the way he has shown those skills to be. I can't make that clear. Super, super smart fighter, okay? Maybe the smartest one in the sport. So adaptability two ways. If you're going to fight Jon, you have got to get in on him early, because as each round passes, he's going to take things from you. In the second one, he's single shots, but with high variance. You ever notice something about Jon? This was less true at UFC 214, but still pretty true. It was especially true in the first fight. He doesn't really throw combinations. He'll do a lot of trickery, like he'll throw a thing down here and then punch up top, or he'll fake away and then go a different direction. He does a lot of setting things up. It's not like he just single shots into the nakedness. No, he puts things together. But he doesn't throw a jab, cross, leg kick, uppercut. He doesn't really put a lot of strikes together, and yet is highly accurate. On top of that, here's what he'll do. If he throws a punch from the right side, at a bare minimum, he'll throw a punch from the left side the next time. But more usually, if he goes up top to the body, he'll go bottom to the body. If he goes to the body with his fist, he'll go to the head with his legs. So he's switching side to side. He's switching on your body where he's attacking. He's switching on his body where the attack originates, either with his fists or with his legs. And he's doing it with an incredible amount of variety over and over and over again. It's not like he's really sitting behind the jab and then he waits to throw the cross, or he's out there really doing dynamic footwork and he's just going back to the leg kick and back to the leg kick. He has tendencies, which we'll get to, but of any fighter I've ever seen, he doesn't throw a lot of combinations, yet still lands. And a big reason for that is his timing, his accuracy, but the high degree of variance. Super, super high. Never really creates a lot of patterns for you to make a read on. That's big. Why? Because he makes a lot of reads on you. The third one, plays with range and rhythm. I've seen this argument about Jon a lot. Like, oh, Jon, he likes to, he wouldn't be so good if his range wasn't so long. There might be some truth to that, in the sense that he does have really long arms. That's going to allow him to put himself into positions that a lot of other fighters wouldn't. But here's why that argument is bad. It's not that having the long arms is not a benefit. It is. It's that it's a benefit because he makes it one, and it doesn't matter what range you fight him at. In close range, he can tear you up. At mid-range, he can tear you up. And at long range, he can tear you up. And he's never really vulnerable in any of those spaces. There are a lot of people with really long reach, maybe not as long as his, but very long, who cannot do that, who cannot maximize all the ranges, both offensively and defensively. He changes rhythm a lot, too. Sometimes he'll come at you with a real predictable front kick to the body, and then he'll quickly switch to the cross. and then sometimes he'll come back with a real lazy hook, and then another sort of jab to the body, and then quickly he'll come upstairs. He's changing not only the shot selection and where it's coming from, but the rhythm at which he throws it. And then last but not least, maintains greater efficient offensive output. That is perhaps the most important one outside of the first one. I know it's ranked 4th because I want to give you a sense of how he throws, but this is so huge. Could not be bigger. I went and I asked Fight Metric, I asked them, guys, is there anything in the numbers that you can look at that tell you which opponents have had success against Jon and which ones haven't? And the answer is yes, there is. Who are the 2 fighters who did the best against him? Obviously Gustafsson, and the other one, Daniel Cormier, right? I don't know what else you could say as a choice. He basically has blown out everybody else. Here's what they found in the numbers. If you can keep it close with him in terms of if he lands on you, you land on him, you can do a lot. And that's specifically true if you punch to the body and punch to the head. Listen to some of these numbers. This is from Fight Metric. This is from my boy Michael Carroll. He has the worst Twitter name in the world. It's MJCFlip.script. It's a terrible Twitter name, but his Twitter feed is a treasure trove of interesting stats, facts, and analysis, and he's at Fight Metric, and he's at all these events. Here's what he told me. Jones's opponents can be competitive if they box with him. In Jones's title fights that went to the 3rd round or further, he dominated and combined significant head and body strikes most of the time. In his blowout wins, for example, here's how he did in terms of the significant head and body strike differential. So this is how much more he landed overall in those 2 ways than his opponents. He had 67 more versus Hua, plus 20 versus Jackson, plus 58 versus Evans, plus 39 versus Belfort, plus 60 versus Teixeira. By contrast, in his competing fights with Cormier, he went plus 3 on significant head strikes in the first fight and only plus 4 in the second. Of all Jones championship fights that went to the 3rd round or longer, Gustafsson is the only opponent to outland him in significant head strikes, doing so 63-53. Gustafsson is also the only fighter to beat Jones in significant body strikes, doing so 33-28. Now, Jones does set up a lot of offense off of his leg kicks, either through a variance or he'll time something behind it. But Gustafsson landed a greater number of significant head strikes in 4 out of the 5 rounds. Each round, of course, very close. Jones did outland Gustafsson to the body in the first 2 rounds, but Alex was ahead in the final 3 and then overall in the category. You got to get in his face and you have to land often. Easier said than done, but the guys who can really do that, they disrupt that. At its core, how do you beat Jon Jones? You have to take away that. Because you might be able to beat him in the first couple of rounds or even be competitive in certain spots late. But if he can do that, if he can adapt to you over time because he has time and rhythm and motion to set in. All right, let's look at something here. Real quickly, I wanted to show you this. This is the first Cormier and DC fight. Let me zoom in here, all right? So you've got Jones up top, Cormier on bottom here. Right there, right? There's Jones up top, Cormier on bottom, okay? Here's what I wanted to, let me clear this out. Let me show you this if I can. God damn it. Let me show you this if I can. Right, Jones up top. He threw 111. God damn it. I am just terrible with this thing. He threw 111 head strikes, only landed 43. This is on Cormier the first time. He threw 41 body, 26 leg. So really, the majority were head strikes, a few to the body, and didn't really super go after the legs, although obviously it's a pretty important part, but really didn't land a whole lot with them. Was a lot of head hunting, right? A lot of head hunting. Look at these numbers in the second fight. Granted, less time, but let's examine them here if we can. And again, so you're going to have Jones on bottom this time. In this case, look what he did. Rather than 111, granted there was more time, 74, 43, 48. What does that tell you? A much more balanced attack from Jon Jones the second time. Number 2, what else can you say about this? Here's another thing I'd like to point out to you. Again, this is the Cormier fight, so take that for what it's worth. Look at these striking totals for Jon Jones in these rounds in terms of what he was able to land. 25, 16, 24, 16, and 11. Now, this second fight went a lot shorter, but look at this. 31-22, excuse me, what am I saying? 34 he landed in the first one, 30 in the second, and 31-52. Go back and watch the second fight. The technique is smoother, the kicking is snappier, the punches crisper, and he throws them at a much higher clip. Why? Because when he's doing that, he can begin to get information. He can begin to keep the fight in the space that he wants to keep it. He can make the reads and then make adjustments over time. So what can we say about the numbers in the Gustafsson fight? All right, let's look at this real quickly. Here's our striking totals. Overall, Jon's up top and Gustafsson's on the bottom. 115 to the head, 37 to the body, 65 to the leg. Well, 53, 28, and 53. So he split a lot between the head and the leg, not so much to the body. What is one thing that I'm expecting as a consequence of these numbers? I'm expecting a much more balanced attack from him. He will still favor the head. He will still favor the legs. He always will. It's so central to his game if you really watch it. But I'm expecting this number to go up, and I'm expecting there to be a little bit of a recalibration as a consequence. So now that I've told you exactly how Gustafsson did it, or at least got very, very close with his boxing, what were the specific tactics that he did to do it? Let's watch them, because, of course, Gustafsson's going to make adjustments too. I'm making this kind of about Jon because he's the central focus of the fight, and I think for many people, certainly for the media itself. But Gustafsson's going to make adaptations too. The only point for me is no one really makes adjustments like Jon, but he surprised Jon the first time, certainly made it extremely competitive. So what did he do in that fight to get ahead? Here's what he did. We got a few things we're going to look at here, all right? Whoop. All right, here we are. I'm going to show you a couple things from round one, a couple things from round two, one thing from round four, and a couple things from round five if we have time for all of that. What did he do? Basically, what's kind of interesting is if you go back and you watch the Cormier fights, what was Cormier doing to Jon? He was walking into him, right? Constantly walking into him, just marching him down. Why does he do that? Well, one, he likes to do it because over time, he can get that underhook and he can begin to, I'll call it wall and brawl, or what he was standing ground and pound, whatever you want to talk it, where he can where he can get the underhook, and then he can just do damage with one of the other hands. He can then set up a takedown. He can pull in the head. He can tire you. He really likes that. Plus, just the backing up takes away people's offense. It enables his. And people just get tired over time. They can't deal with the pace, right? So it's really sort of central to his game. Jon found a way to deal with it. One of those ways was, again, shot variance. That was one. Another one was he's really good about minding the distance. He likes to throw those side kicks to the leg, front teep kicks to the body. He likes to throw, in the second fight, a lot of shots to the body, just constantly landing on a guy, marching in to keep that distance, allow him to back up. Effective use of his reach. Making sure, yes, I have these long arms, but that doesn't mean anything if I don't know how to effectively enable them. And particularly those lower body attacks where he's keeping guys away is central to it. What's funny in this fight is early, Jon acts as the Cormier between these two, where Jon against Cormier had to kind of circle on the outside and figure things out. That's what Gustafsson does against Jon in this fight. Now, not in the same ways, of course. They're very much their own fighters. But that relationship got inverted. So Jon was having to fight essentially Jon in a way, which is why I think he had a little bit of trouble. Now, Jon is a two-way fighter, but it's just interesting how in the Cormier fights, this is the Jon position. And in the Gustafsson fight, this is the Jon position, although that changes a little bit at the end of this one. One of the major tactics you're going to see, let's just sort of go through this. Let's watch here very quickly. Jon, as I mentioned, likes to push people back with his kicks and likes to put other offense behind it just to set things up, right? How'd the head kick land for Jon? A number of ways. Was the southpaw stance, but he was going constantly to the body, constantly to the legs, timed the dip to the right, and then lit him up, right? Here's another thing he likes to do. He likes to put so much behind this. What Gustafsson did in this fight was anytime he threw a jab of any kind that was at all lazy, and his jabs aren't super lazy, it wasn't kind of hanging him out there, but if he wasn't snapping that and coming right back, he was jamming inside. If he threw a kick, he either threw a kick back, Gustafsson did, or counterfought with his own boxing. So here's Jon throwing a kick, and Gustafsson comes in and responds right away. Doesn't necessarily land. We're only 5 seconds into the fight. But you're going to see this over and over and over and over again. And so long as the fight is in this range, it's either even or slightly favors Gustafsson. We keep going. Boom. Comes around, goes to the body, backs him up there. You can see that switch. And by the way, this circling, he goes back and forth. You have to. Gustafsson does, because you can't just go one way. But predominantly is a clockwise circler. Predominantly. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Boom. And then that's that. All right? Here's another one. Watch what happens. Keep your eyes on Jon here. We're still in the first round. 30 seconds in. All right? Who's on the outside? Normally, this is terrible, right? Normally, if you're in this space, you're in trouble. You don't want to be there. But watch what Gustafsson is able to do. A good footwork, evasive footwork, constantly on the motion, like Khabib against Conor, right? Just going side to side to side to side. Wait for it. Tries to get the outside angle, and then backs him up. This is how Jon does it. Gets that outside angle, and then tries to back him up, and then uses his own kick against him. And what does it do? It backs Jon up. Look at how much space is between them. So, as I mentioned, he almost assumes the Jon Jones in the Cormier fight role here. Is another tactic that he was able to use. And then goes back to his normal stance. All right, here's another one. Watch Jon. Jon's coming up to throw a kick, right? What does Gustafsson do? Throws his own, stays in his face, and as soon as he feels this one, boom, gives it right back to him. Never lets, early on anyway, any shot, particularly a lower body shot from Jon Jones, go uncontested. Either jams the space with his boxing or responds immediately with the legs. You see this pattern over and over again. And again, look at that, same thing. Now Jon parries it away, the front kick, but you can see how central it was to the game plan here. All right, here's another one. Now we're sort of a little bit in the round. Watch Jon. Picks it up. What does Gustafsson do? Gets under it and immediately charges into the space and kind of lands a left there, almost, not quite, gets out of the way. Jon gets out of the way of this one for the most part, but this was the thing. We're not going to let you set up and make reads and create distance ever. If you land a kick on me and I'm Alexander Gustafsson, I'm going to crack you. If you land a kick on me, even if it's a measuring kick, I'm coming in to jam you. You see it over and over again, just like that, challenging it every time. How about this one? Here he is, fading like I mentioned. He's a clockwise circler by and large. Keep your eyes on Jon Jones. Throws a kick. What does Gustafsson do? You can barely see the kick, but it's happening. What does Gustafsson do? Immediately comes around. Boom. Cracks him with a left hook, and then threatens with another shot. So Jon is now forced to retreat, making him pay over and over and over and over and over again. Put the screen up here if you can for just a second. The thumbnail slide, please. Make sure I'm not overcommitting here. Thank you very much. Let me find another good one here. Is this the one? Here, one more time. Put it back up. Here we go. Watch Jon. Steps in, throws the kick. It lands. What does Gustafsson do? Pop, 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 jams the space, and makes him answer for it every time. All right, and then they reset. Slide, please. All right, here we are. What is this one? Oh, and then here we go again. Remember that famous takedown? Put it up, please. Remember that famous takedown in the first, I think it was the first round that Gustafsson had, everyone blew everyone's mind? How did he do it? Jon set up the kick, and Gustafsson, reacting off every one of those, comes in and then jams the space. And of course, eventually gets the takedown. You can put the slide back up for a second. So you can see what the game plan was here. If you throw a kick in any capacity, I'm on you. If you try to get close to me, I'm going to use your tools against you to push you back. It was a very, very smart, disciplined game plan. In that range, that's where Gustafsson had all the success. So then you move to, let's say, the second round, right here. Yes, second round. Let's put this back up, please. Let's see what happens here. What does Gustafsson do? Throws a head kick. That was really good for him, timing those head kicks. And then, by the way, as I mentioned before, what do you notice about Jon? Single shot, right? But what does Gustafsson do one more time? Catches it and then uses it to force him to the ground. Now he gets out of this. Slide up, please. He gets out of this, but you get the idea. Answering everything. All right, let's move this along so we can not belabor the point. And then he stuffs the takedown. And by the way, another key to this, real quickly, throw the slide up. Another key to the footwork was to get, hard to make a read on him. Another one was anytime they clinched, he hand fought Gustafsson like a madman. And this was the last one. If he got caught against the fence, you could see he's got underhooks here on both sides. He's able to effectively do that. and then is in. Somehow he lets, I don't quite understand this one. He still has the superior grip, but he takes it inside and uses that to turn into the same side hand control. I don't quite get that, but whatever. All right, very quickly, we now move to fourth round. Last minute of the fourth round. This is right before Jon lands that was with the right hand, with the spinning back elbow. He actually threw it once and missed, and then did it again as Gustafsson circled into it. I'm not going to get into that. It's famous. Here's something else he did. Remember I told you that Jon's good at range? Everyone's like, oh, his reach is why everyone suffers. Well, no, he uses his reach effectively, and when he loses that reach, he finds ways to manipulate inside that range. Here is when he's beginning to take over. When Gustafsson gets inside the space, look at this. First of all, he throws, Gustafsson throws, and now he's anticipating, so he's getting out of the way. He's setting up his own defensive sensibilities here, right? So Gustafsson sets out to throw, Jon gets out of the way, and then throws his own elbow inside the range. This is what I'm talking about. Where do you want to fight? You want to fight in the clinch? He's happy to oblige. You want to fight at short distance? He's happy to oblige. You want to fight at boxing distance? He did have some trouble in this one, and you want to fight super long range? He can do that as well. Here is him adapting in fights to getting jammed, to getting stuffed. I'm anticipating the read. I'm dodging the punch. And rather than circling back out, now I'm going to use that space and my own limbs to land on you. Adjustments over time, right? He's really quite gifted at that. And he does it back to back to back here. Watch. He's like, I like that. Gustafsson is on the outside. Jon's coming in, right? Eats a little bit of a one, but kind of anticipates it, almost parries it down a little bit, and boom, jams the space immediately. You see that? Adjustments. Adjustments. Before he was just getting out of the way or even just eating it. Now he is defensively making sensible adjustments, moving in appropriately, and then realizing, hey, that elbow might be there if I can now jam the space versus retreating. And he does it again one more time here, by the way. Watch as we go slide by slide here. Does it again, gets in his face, anticipates it, boom. And now he misses, but you can see the whole point here. Getting inside that boxing, taking it away. He knows that if you're at the end of Gustafsson's punches, that's where he's doing all the work. You got to get on the outside, you got to get on the inside, or you got to take them away altogether. So then whatever. So now we're in the fifth round. Let's watch. Oops, what did I miss here? Oh yeah, here we go. So let's watch this. So now, Jon, before, what was he doing? Throwing a kick. What was Gustafsson doing? Either answering it or jamming it with his boxing to counteract. Now watch what happens. He throws the kick. Gustafsson's coming, right? But now Jon knows Gustafsson's coming and gets out of the way a little bit. Kind of tries to duck it, but the punch doesn't really land, but gets his hand out. And I know people are like, oh, he got his hands in his eyes. But he's defensively reading and getting out of the way on this side. You'll see more and more of this. Hang on. Here's another one, right? Jab to the body. Nice one by Gustafsson. Gets out of the way. Let's see what happens. Jon moves in. All right. Switches stance for a second. Decides to keep it. Angles himself over. Throws that body kick. Gets the hands to come up. And rather than retreat, has his hands ready for the defensive or the offensive response in this case from Gustafsson and gets away. So rather than, oh, I'm going to stop using my kicks for offense. No. I know what you're going to do when I use my kick for offense. Now I'm going to be defensively ready for it, making adaptations in fights to take away the very thing you were doing well. Put up the screen, please. Let's see here. Let's see. Stuff's at one of the takedowns here, which is nice. We don't need to see that, but you guys understand. Stuff at the takedowns was another key part of it, right? Obviously. Let's see this one. Oh, I love this one. This is so subtle. Okay, put it back up. What's Jon doing most of the time? He was trying to get takedowns when Gustafsson was retreating. Very, very hard to do that. This one is so subtle. Let me blow it up a little bit. This one is so subtle, but it's just so genius. He finally gets a moment where he is pushing into Gustafsson, but rather than just constant pressure into him, which is what got Cormier head kicked against Jones in the second fight, he decides to occasionally press and then occasionally retreat. Because it turns out if he can counterfight Gustafsson, boy, he had a lot of success. Here's this. Watch how delicate this is. Gustafsson steps, Jon's pressing in, but look, halts his momentum and waits, backs up just a little bit, Gustafsson takes tiny little steps forward. Jon reads that. Now, what do you think he's going to do with that? He's finally got an opponent coming at him. Slowly, not racing, but it's enough. So here's what he does. Hot level change. I'm telling you. Before, he was just worried about applying constant pressure, literally chasing Gustafsson around the cage at certain points to get his hands on him. But then he figured out there's a way to corral and maybe be a little more clever with my footwork, going side to side, going in and out. And then when I back up and he's coming toward me, then use that for the takedown opportunity. And by the way, Gustafsson does a pretty good job. What does Jon do? Oh, the double's not there. I'm just going to switch to basically like he just clubs him over the collar like a knee tap, basically like that. You see that hand? Look at the left hand of Jon, right? Let me do this here. It's here, right? There's the left hand of Jon. Watch this. It comes up top, and he uses that up here to go that way, like you're driving a bus, like you're turning the steering wheel. That's what he does, right? That's how he makes another adaptation. He finds you to get in close so I can get that double leg grip. I know my first takedown's not going to work, but I can switch. He did the same takedowns to Chael Sonnen, by the way. It's a go-to for him. He's very, very good at it, as you can well imagine. Boom, and takes him down. We'll move on here. Okay, what are we expecting, right? Jon's got much better defensive sensibilities here. He's in that southpaw stance. So let's see. Gustafsson's coming in a little bit. You see Gustafsson coming in. Jon uses that. Now, good check from Gustafsson. Okay, and tries to punch, but Jon immediately, he gets this cross. Look at this here. I want to make a note of it. He does this. Let me get a better color on it. Yeah. See this from Jon? He does it constantly diagonal across an opponent. It's not on the same side shoulder. Notice it's his left hand and it's the left shoulder. So it's not going left to right straight. It's across the body, which allows him an ability to see punches coming, to have that hanger that we talked about with Tyson Fury, where if it does come over the top, you can kind of roll with it a little bit, right? It just gives you some options, and instead backs out and isn't there for that punch. Look at that. Before, he would have been totally jammed at that point. Screen up, please. Real quickly, we'll move through this. Da-da-da-da. Boom. And one more time, watch this. Gustafsson is now pursuing him. He's got him to pursue by kind of pushing in and waiting, retreating a little bit. Here comes Gustafsson, so Jon does, boom, perfectly timed body kick. What's he do with his hands? Push away. And now he's anticipating that response. Screen up one more time, please, if you don't mind. We're almost done here. We're almost done. Let's see if there's anything else worth looking at here. The left high kick was good. The trading punches. Boom. Here's a perfect example. Come back, please. This might be the last one we look at. Remember all the things that Jon was doing poorly at first. Now, here we are, 20 seconds left in the fifth. Watch this. This is everything. Southpaw stance. Look how he gets Gustafsson on the half beat. Boom, cracks him. Nicely done. By the way, yeah, from the southpaw stance. By the way, this kick from Jon, he can also throw it from the orthodox stance. He just flicks it up, but he prefers it from the southpaw stance so he can get the full torque. In any event, throws it like this, comes back down. Now watch. Short range, anticipating a response from Gustafsson, doesn't let it happen. Pops him with the elbow, pushes away, and leans. That's what I'm talking about. That is what I'm talking about. It looks so subtle in person when you're watching in real time. It's hard to really appreciate. But what the numbers, you can put the screen up, and I'm going to go back to the same old slide one more time. But the numbers clearly tell us, if I may, okay, put it back up. Last things last. Adaptability two ways. And between the Cormier fights, I showed you some of the numbers. Before, he was kind of headhunting and going to the legs a little bit, but not too much to the body. The legs are an essential ingredient for him to strike. But in the second fight, he balanced it out much more. And again, his technique, we don't have footage of it, but the technique was smoother, kicks crisper, punchier, timing impeccable, right? So he's getting better as a fighter, taking the lessons learned. By the way, let me give a shout to BJJ Scout. We didn't even go into it. If you look at the first Cormier fight, BJJ Scout did a whole video on this, so I'm just going to tell you to go watch it. But the basic idea is that here's another adaptability. In the first 2 rounds against Cormier, he was trying to tie him up in different ways inside the clinch. He was trying collar ties, and he was still getting punched for it. He was trying, a bunch of different techniques. till he finally decided an underhook and wrist control were the only ways to prevent Cormier from doing a whole lot. So by the 5th round, he had total control in that space. I forget what else he was trying to do. He was like using a plum, a tie clinch. What was the other one he was trying to do? Oh, he was trying to use frames, right? So you used a frame against Gustafsson just fine. Against Cormier, he used a frame early, and Cormier would just come under or around it. But by the 4th, 5th round against Cormier, he had the underhook, he had wrist control, and that was all gone. In this contest against Gustafsson, what was happening for him? He was getting jammed off of his kicks. They were taking that away from him. The key for Jon Jones going forward is going to be, can he find a way to create the offense like he did in those 4th and 5th rounds without being offensively countered all the time by Gustafsson? Or can Gustafsson find another way to land with his boxing? Can he bring that boxing back to life? When he's boxing in that range, as I mentioned before, he's the only one to outland Jon in significant strikes to the body and the head ever. Everyone else has been less than him. So, adaptability, 2 ways. You saw how he adapted in the fight. How is he going to adapt between fights? It's a big question. It's a big question for Gustafsson too. Single shot but high variance. As you saw before, he doesn't throw a lot of combos. A little bit, he puts strikes together well, but it's a lot of look up here, punch, and then kick. Or it's a lot of look up here, and then punch, and then circle, and then throw something else. He's putting strikes together, but he's not like a Dutch-style combination striker. That's not who he is. But the degree of variance, left to right, high to low, punch, kick, body, head, is so hard to predict. He plays with range and rhythm. You've seen it before. Oh, he's got long arms. He's got long arms that he uses really well at the distance, at boxing, and even in tight. And he can just play with all 3 of them, even as the game shifts between the different phases, and maintains great, efficient offensive output. If you want to beat Jon Jones, you got to be there with him number for number in terms of those strikes. You have to match his intensity. You have to match his, and I say efficient. You can't just throw. You have to land. You have to land, and he lands at a high percentage. He's single-shotting, and he still gets it done and a good offensive output. You got to be there strike for strike with him. As Gustafsson showed, boxing seems to so far work best. What is Gustafsson best at? Boxing. This one ought to be highly interesting. Is it going to be the return of maybe the best fighter we've ever seen? Or is Gustafsson going to prove, I could show you in the first fight some of his kryptonite. I'm going to build on that in the second one. I don't know, but I can't wait to see it. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to MMA Fighting's YouTube channel. By the way, in addition to being Christmas Eve day, we have tons of content coming your way from Las Vegas. Everyone on there is leaving their families after the holidays, or even during the holidays, to come bring you guys some great content. So I hope you guys really appreciate it, and we know that you do, and we thank you for that. All right? My name is Luke Thomas. Thank you so much for watching. One more MMA hour this year, and then 2018 is behind us, but we still have this to get to, the Jon Jones versus Gustafsson fight. I can't wait. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, stay frosty.